Okay. You have supplements?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Are you getting
everybody
ripped?
needs supplements to stay healthy. If you're trying to live a healthy lifestyle, lose weight.
Would you say you're getting ripped up tonight? R.I.P. whatever that trend is? Okay.
I don't know that one.
Okay, it's some TikTok thing. I'm too old for this. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm getting ripped tonight. I don't know. Okay. Let's move
the
on.
Jack Black thing?
Yeah, I guess. Is that where it's from? Where is that from, though?
I don't know.
Is it from Jack
I've just
Black?
seen that one video where he's being silly, and then he starts singing Tenacious D.
Long. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking of. But I think it comes from something else. But I don't know. Who cares? Whatever. Okay. This is what we're going to discuss today, right? Wait, no, you have supplements? What are you talking? Well, we're talking about Machiavelli today. So
So
before
actually,
that,
I listened to a podcast a while ago. It was Tom Woods' podcast, who is
Machiavellian,
a libertarian voice, but he got his PhD in history from Harvard or from Columbia. And so he was talking with another Columbia professor who's an Italian literature professor who got into libertarianism. And then she has an article actually called On Political Power and Personal Liberty in The Prince and the Discourses.
Yeah. It's very relevant. Wait, so how does this have to do with supplements? Or you're saying supplemental material?
I'm saying that's a supplemental article that I had.
I thought... that's hilarious. I'm such an idiot. Okay, good, though. I kind of wish it was like steroids, so I'll be honest.
Yeah. I have that too.
Okay, cool. Definitely a lot of people have written on this, and it's very interesting. I mean, so I'm curious, just... Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll introduce it. So we're talking today, and for the next 3 episodes, we're starting The Machiavellians, Defenders of Freedom by James Burnham. That's a very provocative title. Yeah. What did you think, I guess? I'm curious.
It was a little bit hard to read.
Yes.
It was pretty dry.
Yes. Also,
I think I don't like the writer. Like, I don't think I would get along with this guy.
Did I not call this?
Not Machiavelli, by the way, but the author
I know. Yes. No, I don't think you would either. I mean, again, this is like the guy that was, I think, the mentor to William F. Buckley.
Right,
so, I mean, we're talking about like the godfather of American conservatism in some sense.
He sat with his legs crossed a lot.
Yeah, like I'm doing... Exactly right now.
You need a tweed jacket. You need to be talking down to me a little bit more.
Yes, and emphasizing the ends of words. Yeah. Anyway,
right.
Yes, I kind of thought that. But what do you think about the idea that he's proposing, though? Because actually, I felt like you might actually like the idea he's proposing in this.
Well, I
discourse.
guess I had a hard time.
Yeah, it could have been hard to parse.
It was because it felt like it kept contradicting itself.
Yes.
Like many of the texts we've been reading. Actually.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, if we want to start with that, we could start with one of my biggest issues is he like talks about how Machiavelli doesn't discuss human nature and stuff. And then he goes on to discuss all the ways that Machiavelli talks about human nature.
Right.
Although he was being, I think, very specific in saying he is talking about human nature, but it's really only in the realm of politics.
Right.
And I think he was trying to confine. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But yeah. So maybe I should. Should I just summarize it and then we can sort of talk about the specifics? So it's 5 sections, and I should say so. The general way that the book works, and I sort of skimmed the Dante one again just to remind myself, is he's proposing the idea that most people, when they discuss politics, are actually not talking about what they're actually purporting to do. They're talking about generalities, and then the things that they actually do often actually go in complete opposite of that.
Right.
And he opens the entire book, and I think if you have time, it might be interesting. Although I do agree he's very dry. He opens with the 1932 platform of the Democratic Party. And, he talks about all these things that they say, an immediate and drastic reduction of governmental expenditures, maintenance of the national credit by the federal budget, a sound currency, basically limiting government, which is
Right.
the exact opposite that FDR did, right?
Right,
So
right.
he's writing this book in 1940. World War II is raging, and he's basically showing, like, look at what they said, and then look at what they did, and
Right.
this is how politics are done. And so he uses Machiavelli. Basically, the reason Machiavelli is the overarching theme of the book is because Machiavelli was, by his measure, one of the first big authors to really just say, this is just basically approach politics as a scientist and say, this is this is the facts, this is what everybody's doing, let's not mince words here. And really, you could say it's a defense of Machiavelli, because he's saying, why have we basically given him this bad reputation for basically just telling us the way that we are.
Right.
And I would say, so that's probably a big bird's eye summary. And yeah, I guess we can get into it.
Sure. So I think broadly, he gives Machiavelli too much credit in a bad way. And I also think he is distilling Machiavelli in a way that's actually losing information, like information loss, because he makes statements throughout the chapters, things like, you can agree or disagree with Machiavelli, you can prove him wrong, but he can't be misunderstood, which is pretty strange to me, because my understanding of Machiavelli is he is one of the most disputed figures about what he's even talking about. And when I read Machiavelli, like the passages, there's tons of like long quotes and passages from Machiavelli's writing in here. They are not eminently clear what they mean to me. Several of them I had to read 4 or 5 times just to get an idea. Part of it is in translation, it's older language, but every time I've read Machiavelli, like I've started reading The Prince multiple times, and it's not abundantly clear what Machiavelli's position is to me.
Right. And that's where I think it is that he's being very specific, in that he's just talking about that Machiavelli he's being clear, and that he's not talking about any principles or any like overt generalities about the way, like, idealist. He's not being an idealist. He's not being a utopian. He's
not being utopian. I think I agree with you. He's saying he's not being an idealist, and I do appreciate that the author does kind of jab at that statement a little bit, because of course, operating on a purely scientific basis is an ideal, and so that is its own principle that you could be trying to uphold, and the author does make note of that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point, but. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I actually got the feeling that by the end of it, I'm curious if you got this feeling, that Machiavelli, to your point about maybe not actually being clear about what he wanted, the author, James Burnham, says that Machiavelli's ideal government was a republic.
Right.
And I think that's also interesting because that's essentially what the U.S., made, and a mixed government being the best is what he was saying, which is what the U.S. definitely does, or at least aspired to. We can debate that another day.
I mean, I think it is a mixed government for sure.
So the interesting thing, though, is I actually feel like Machiavelli secretly might be an anarchist.
Yes. Well, this is what the libertarians have to say about him.
Oh, so they think that too. Okay, great.
Yeah, Rothbard writes about him.
Okay, so me and Rothbard agree.
and actually, that Italian studies professor that I was talking about, she teaches a course on Machiavelli, and she begins the course by having her students read Anatomy of the State.
Yeah. Because, because at the end, right, he starts talking about what is Machiavelli's real sort of, I said he doesn't have any ideals, but he sort of has one, I guess you could say, if there is one, and it's the ideal of liberty. Right. And I thought you would like this quote, if I could find it quickly, if you think otherwise, so this is at the end of chapter 4. It's basically talking about the Duke of Athens, Machiavelli is talking about from the History of Florence, comes in and takes over Florence. And this is supposed to show that even if you use all of the force that you can, if you don't have the will of the people, you'll never basically be able to take. You'll never be able to take the will of the people that are people that idealize liberty, because they'll always fight you. And so it ends with, if you think otherwise, you deceive yourself. For to people that have lived free, every link is a load and every bond is a burden. What do you think of that?
Yeah. I wish there were more people like that.
Yeah. But anyway, this is, I think, one of the reasons why I wanted to sort of talk about this after the anarchy episode, because it was just making me think, like, there's actually a lot of interesting anarchistic principles in Machiavellianism, you could say, or in Machiavelli's sort of writings, I guess. And then, but then also this book, as we'll get to, goes into some interesting things that, like, I was getting at, where it's like, what are some natural tendencies it feels like that we go that we go towards, and so he gets at that later. But an interesting, since we're on the mixed government system, an interesting sort of one of the contradictions that I found when I was reading it is it talks at the beginning about how Machiavelli was completely against middle way ideas. So compromises make things worse for everybody. And extremism is a much better policy. Going completely extreme into whatever it is that you are trying to achieve. And then what's interesting is the idea of a mixed government, to me, is like the most middle way thing of all time. Yes, but this is where I think it's getting a little bit different, because in that sense, they were talking about, well, I actually had that same thought, so I won't say I disagree, but let me try to parse it out, because I do feel like they are talking about, they're two, because in the case of the extreme example, he was talking about how he believes there's really only two ways to get a population under your control. It's basically you either completely the carrot or the stick, basically. You give them things to make them love you.
I think that was in the middle, though, right? It's like right up top, he's talking about the middle. He actually uses the term the middle way.
Well, yeah, he says the middle way is the way that you end up taking, and it will get you in trouble. And it's the way, like, the Romans did it, is they either went in and they completely, like, got rid of the people that would be an issue, and they just, like, killed them or dispersed their families and, like, destroyed their homes and just sent them adrift. Or they would take in the people that seemed like they were going to be obedient and, like, you know, really just get them, like, citizenship and stuff like that. Yeah. But if you try like a middle ground approach, you'll end up with some people that, you know, are just upset still, and then other people, you know. So, but I agree. I mean, it's you know, and you know, getting to that big contradiction of that I felt like he was making when he was talking later, and I think about chapter 4, but I don't recall exactly. About like how psychology, you know, he was basically talking about psychology and how psychology and politics can't be, they're connected, but they're not as directly connected as he thinks people think are. And also he even like came out and said that they're not, I would say, before that. And then he kind of hedged his statement and said, actually, okay, there's some psychology that is going to play a role in politics, but we just don't have a good theory, a complete enough psychological theory. So that's, I think, where he sort of hedges, and that's where I think where he might hedge in other ways too, is that he does, I agree, it's a bad style of writing. He comes out and he basically says like a statement and then he basically contradicts it, but he sort of works it into a little bit more of a refined thing. He's saying like, for our purposes, we don't know enough about psychology to understand how it's playing a role in politics. Thus, I'm not going to try to look into the minds of men. But again, I think he is, though, which is why I think I disagree. And I even wrote the first time I read this book in that section, like, I think this is a weak argument. So, Yeah, I agree that he's not cogent on everything.
I think actually where I have the biggest problem is when he makes much stronger statements. Things like his statement that it's eminently clear that men don't have the desire to be peaceful as their primary goal, or something like that, or that all men don't desire to be peaceful. And
yes.
To me, the way he's making the statement is sort of a statement of nature, and I think the problem is I agree at its face that not everybody is pursuing peace, probably, but I think that there's this other thing about how almost everybody is pursuing what they believe to be good in some way, or at least good for them.
Right.
And most people don't believe that they're a bad guy. And so I think that there are other things that people might be pursuing what they see as peace in all sorts of complex ways that on their face might not feel that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up, because that really is. But that was him saying that, because I initially,
this wasn't Machiavelli.
Yes, because I initially went back to that thinking it was a contradiction when he was saying how Machiavelli doesn't talk about human nature. I was like, you just talked about that, but no, he basically opens up with saying what he thinks. And yeah, I mean, and I actually wrote in that, like in the margins, like I guess it kind of makes sense that he would have this opinion, this, I guess you could say, nihilistic opinion about human nature, because it is World War II that he's living during. Sure. You know what I mean? I like it does. He's living during like one of the worst times in history, and one of the most brutal, and one of where there's examples all over of people just acting in ways that just seem completely counter to a principle.
But even if you take like FDR's perspective or something, I don't know if this is actually what he was thinking, but I would say that most Americans who've taken sort of general U.S. history believe that the U.S.'s involvement in World War II was about achieving peace. So, like,
yeah, but I'm talking about Hitler,
Hiroshima and Nagasaki, firebombing of Dresden, invasion of France, all that stuff.
Right.
Like, on their face, the least peaceful things you could possibly be doing.
Yes.
But, I mean, in a lot of people's minds, that was what made peace.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yes.
Well, actually, ultimately, I agree. I agree at the base with the statement. I don't think that most people's primary goal is peace around the world. I just think that people's goals are a much more complex landscape, and making an offhand comment like it's obviously not, to me, there's nothing obvious about it.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's like, I think that on the local level, nobody probably thinks that they're a villain, but it's very easy for us to lose self-awareness and become villains.
Yes.
And even think that we're doing right within the context of it. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, have you ever just seen like people get pulled over that after like they've been obviously just like hit a bunch of cars and they're in complete, like, I mean, obviously this is a very acute example, but there's chronic examples of delusion of this sort, I guess is what I'm getting at. And I think we can create scenarios. And so that's why on the local level, what I'm getting at is that you can think that you're a hero, but on a global level, it's obvious that Hitler was not a hero. God, I gotta bleep that.
But I think Hitler thinks he's a hero.
That's what I'm saying, yes. I think level.
That people who get pulled over for drunk driving and stuff, a lot of those people.
No, but do you get what I'm saying here? It's on the local level. You can think you're a hero, but if you just step one like level outside of that, outside of the individual into the observer, it's clear how maybe actually the prerogative that is running most people in the setting of power, because this is where he also discusses two types of people, the rulers and the ruled. And the rulers are specifically defined by a propensity for power. So that's the thing. Yes. You've already kind of selected for this group of people that want it. And so maybe they do have this extra difference, I guess. I don't know.
Right. But if you zoom out and George Bush invades Afghanistan, is that for peace? Maybe.
it's for
I'm
power.
not saying that I believe that. I'm saying that could be the perspective you see.
No. But his
so
whole...
you could zoom out from Hitler, and you could be some supporter of his in Germany, and be like, everything he's doing is for peace.
Yes. But this is where I think it's more explicitly the fundamental definition that I think he and Machiavelli share is that politics is the study of power among individuals.
Politics is the study of power.
Yes. And so, I mean, this is what he says, at least.
Right.
On page 37, I can't find...
Right, when he does his definitions.
Yeah. Actually, honestly, it might be worth going through, like, just reading the first sentence
That's
of
a good
these.
idea.
So Machiavelli, so this is chapter 2, Machiavelli's method. So he's talking about what's the method that Machiavelli's using to study history and politics. And so, and this is the scientific method, essentially. So, yeah, such qualifications as these to Machiavelli's use of the scientific method may, however, be taken for granted by those who do not expect the 16th century to be... why did I read that? Sorry. Okay, so the first part, I'm going to cut that out.
Yeah, don't read that part.
Positively,
don't let anyone know.
Then, in the first place, we find that Machiavelli uses language in a cognitive, scientific manner. Second, Machiavelli delineates with sufficient clarity the field of politics. Third, Machiavelli assembles with some measure of system a large number of facts. Four, Machiavelli is always attempting to correlate sets of facts into generalizations or laws. And that's really it. And so, again, this is held in large part to his contemporaries of the day and really in more direct comparison to the Dante, because that's who Burnham opens with, who Dante basically was writing a request to the Holy Roman Emperor of the time to come in and help them basically defend themselves against the Pope. And so, but he wasn't saying that directly. And so that was sort of Burnham's whole point, is that really this is what Dante wanted, but he was sort of putting it into this whole like fanciful, like, hey, look, Emperor, you are the rightful heir of Rome. You're the Holy Roman Emperor. The monarchy is the supreme, like, deity. He was doing all of this stuff to try to, like, build a case, but really all he wanted was defense from Rome and for Florence, because they were, you know, so that's I guess when we talk about sort of talking about things as they are versus as they aren't, this is one of the ways Machiavelli is distinguished right away. And these 4 points that we just outlined are the ways that Burnham at least thinks that he does it.
Right.
It's really just facts. I mean, that's how we could summarize it.
So a thought that I had when I was reading this section and the entire kind of conversation about Machiavelli being scientific and using a scientific method, is I feel like there is a difference between being sort of plain spoken and saying what you mean directly, because that was a big thing that Burnham kept pointing out.
It was also testable things. That was a big thing that he says.
Right.
So he had testable things, whereas it's like Dante didn't really have testable things, and there's no transcendental stuff in his writings.
Right. I mean, it's like the principle of falsifiability. It's not fair if you make claims that
Can't
aren't
be false.
falsifiable.
Yes.
Right. I completely get that. I think that there's another aspect of it that that there's a lot of credit given to Machiavelli for sort of using, quote, the facts and things like that. And I think when you're discussing things like history and human nature and human action, the idea of facts is very fuzzy. And the idea of data and what to do with that data is very tricky. I mean, we see it today because, you know, you can look at an unemployment number and what do you do with that number? What is that number? Like, what is that number telling you?
The postmodernist in you's coming out. No, but I agree. I mean, we had tons of episodes about this.
Right. And so this is like a lot of the Austrian economists write about the Keynesians and how mistaken they are, because they use these complex equations and algorithms that are just sheer numbers, right? There's no sort of human input, in quotes.
There's no grounding.
But they don't know how the algorithms work, and so they spit something out. And what the Austrians say is that isn't actually how human action works, and that's not how valuation works. There's no such thing as objective value, and so it's not a calculable thing. And I think back to our music history course and the statement, like, there's no such thing as a historical fact. And so with that in mind, the idea of data points gets very difficult, and the idea of being scientific is difficult right off the bat. Because you're already dealing with an interpretation of history.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. Yeah.
Not that Machiavelli is not doing a great job and not doing his best. I just think that science, I don't know, it's the designation of science. Because to me, I'm on board. I get it. I'm like, yeah, plain spoken, testable statements, truth claims. I mean, a truth claim is great because it's either wrong or right. That's awesome. That's like way easier to deal with.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that the idea is that it's a step towards trying to establish some sort of objectivity versus in the past, there wasn't as much of that, right? But yeah, it's true. I mean, he talks about how even at Machiavelli's time, this was a very new thing, and most of the, quote, scientific analysis of text was to solve issues in, like, debates in Catholicism, right?
Right.
But, you know, and so a lot of it was just scrutinizing religious texts, which of course has a load of subjectivity in itself. And you know, and you see this in ancient Greek writings too. Aristotle's constantly using like just events from history that may or may not have happened to corroborate claims that he makes, you know? So yeah, it's true. But it's this idea that it's a maturation process that's occurring. It's becoming a little bit more scientific and trying to get rid of some of the ritual again, like kind of getting back at that one thing that from that chemical book about like and I think it's ultimately due to the fact that, again, we're becoming more conscious. Civilization's basically trying to make humans more conscious. And as we become more conscious, we sort of inevitably are going to, reflect upon things and try to study history because, again, this is like consciousness requires memory, or memory is necessary for consciousness. And anyway, I'm getting into a whole thing. I'm sorry. But I'm bringing up consciousness again because I wanted to talk about it with respect to the lions and the foxes, which is another sort of thing that I think we should discuss now because it's going to come back over and over again in the later chapters. And so this is an example that basically in the rulers, you have sort of two types, lions and foxes, and you can think the lions are like the warriors.
Why is there always two types? We love twos.
We do. We got to break it. Yeah. Antecedent consequent phrase, man. So
yeah, I guess non-binary wasn't a thing.
So the lions are like the warriors, and the foxes are sort of the cunning people. And
it's once again we're Ayn Rand. It's the same thing.
Right. And
Machiavelli must have been copying Ayn.
Yeah, I think so. Well, and I look at this as you've got the sort of barbaric, non-conscious. And he's basically saying, though, that you have to, if you're going to be an effective ruler, you need to basically be both. You can't be one or the other. And the idea is you have to sometimes be a sleeping machine where you just are a forceful animal and you just are, you basically use barbaric ways to get people under your thumb, or you use cunning and mischievous ways to do it and trick them. And so that, they use various examples. But Machiavelli has one example of like the mischievous way in his Prince. I can't remember, from 13th century Florence. And then you could probably say the Romans are the best example of, I don't know. But yeah, that's going to come back and get refined with I guess you could say the Machiavellians in the future to in an interesting way. We'll get to it. That's
Right.
actually my favorite chapter, which we'll read.
So one thing that actually, so bringing in the Joanne Cavallo, the that professor from
Right.
Columbia, she talks about the lion and the fox narrative, and that or it's not really narrative, it's a like construction or something like that, metaphor. But what she's saying is that from Machiavelli's perspective, these are both essentially tyrants.
Mm-hmm.
Both lions and foxes are predators. And all political leaders are predators.
Sure. Yeah, I guess that is what he's saying.
But what's interesting about the way that Machiavelli frames it is it kind of reminds me of the way that economists talk about things. Back to the sort of kind of scientific way of approaching it. It seems less about this is the way life should be, but more about if you want this kind of society, you're going to have to be able to do this, this, and this.
You're saying that he's
So,
saying
like,
that
if you
more?
want to be a ruler that's going to be able to deal with this array of problems, you're going to have to be able to take on a lion role or a fox role or something like that.
Yes, Machiavelli's saying that.
Yeah. I'm saying right. So I'm saying that it reminds me of the way that economists like to talk about things. Not that there's necessarily a right or wrong way to do anything, but if you want this outcome, you're going to have to do this.
Isn't that how everybody talks about things, though? I mean,
so there's a way to say that this is the right way to do things, and you should do this.
yeah, everybody talks about it like that.
What?
Everybody.
No. I'm
speaks
saying
like
that economists don't do that. They don't say
Oh.
what you should or shouldn't do.
Oh,
They say if you want this outcome, do this.
oh,
if you want
I
this,
see what you're saying. Sorry.
Like,
I'm being
If
stupid.
you want to live in a dictatorship, do it
Right.
this way. If you want
Right.
to live in a
Right.
commune,
Right.
do it that way.
Right. I see. Yeah, I mean, yes, he's basically saying if you want to be an effective leader, you need to do this. Yeah.
Right.
But that's a little different because he's not saying that there's multiple ways to be an effective leader. I think he is kind of saying that's the only way.
Sure.
Maybe. Or the only way to be
maybe.
the best, like the most long lasting. You know, it's like
Yeah.
all the other ones, like he said, the lion's going to get caught in the traps and the foxes are going to get eaten by the wolves. So
Right.
to be an effective leader, you take on both. And then you also, yeah, because it's like you have to be strong, be able to commit fraud. And what was the last thing? These are like the three things that you have to do if you're a leader.
Yeah.
And the last thing was, change with the times, basically.
Right.
So, yeah.
The not be hated thing was an interesting distinction too.
Yes. Yeah, and Machiavelli talks about that a lot in The Prince. Not that I've read it.
Is that a book you're not supposed to have read?
Well, it's just all the despots read it. I mean, that was the whole. I mean, that's the whole thing that.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the funny thing. Mussolini wrote the Prelude.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's the point he's making.
I mean,
in the
actually,
last...
when I first started reading the chapter and it's talking about his like unified Italian state, I was like, oh, I get it.
Yes, exactly.
Here we go.
Yeah. Well, and you know what, though? Getting back to that point, though, that is sort of, again, one of the reasons I feel like an anarcho-capitalist state would be hard to maintain indefinitely.
Well, I mean, yeah, calling it a anarcho-capitalist state, you're already...
Whatever region where it exists, smatterings of locations.
It just makes me think of the scene from The Holy Grail.
Yeah, I know.
We're in an anarcho-syndicalist commune.
Yeah, that's a great. Oh yeah, with the peasants. And what is he yelling at the end? Come look at me.
He's like, I didn't vote for you. You don't vote for kings.
Yeah. But I mean, he's in the last chapter though. I mean,
yeah,
I do feel like he's sort of trying to get at that point though about his reputation and that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, it seems like everybody takes Machiavelli for themselves in a way.
Well, again, I would say everybody does that with everyone.
Well, not everybody, but at least the libertarians and then the
I see what you mean. Yes.
Like they read into it what they want, which is part of where I was starting by saying I don't think that Machiavelli is so clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, well, so again, relatively clear. That's the big thing, right? That's the big thing. He's relatively clear compared to a lot of people of his time.
Sure. I mean, so like, maybe compared to people of his time. I think that's a good that's a good distinction.
And he actually, Burnham starts off talking about that, being like, guys, keep your expectations tempered a little bit. I mean, we're talking about somebody who's writing 500 years ago, didn't have nearly as much information. No, I mean, he does say that.
Yeah. Well, because like the description you put of the last podcast about the anatomy of the state, I think you summed it up perfectly. I think could Rothbard have been any clearer? What did you say? State equals bad.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Oh yeah, did I do a good summary? That was good. Okay, cool. That's good. Yeah. Oh, dude, I
like that you did the 2 equals too. It was nice.
Yeah. Well, it's very mathematical.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Python will know what you mean.
Exactly. Did you see that comment? No, you did because you responded to it. Yeah, I've been stalking your post on Reddit because I'm just
what?
Yeah, somebody commented on the Rothbard one. It was like, "Are you going to talk about like the Rothbard sex something or other?" And then you're like, "Haha, no, not on this one." Like, anyway, it was funny though. It does seem like
I said that, and then I thought I've been like, "Oh, we did." You just have to listen to the episode.
Well, I don't even know. Like, what are they talking about? Was that?
I have no clue.
Yeah,
I have no idea. That person commented on something else too, kind of weird. So.
Oh yeah.
I didn't take it that seriously.
Yeah, that's funny. Well, that's good. We've had our first troll. That means we're starting to make it. As soon as you start to get trolled. Yeah. I mean, it's true, because if you're just living in obscurity, that means you're not reaching anybody.
Right.
Well, yeah, I still have, we're good on time. I was like,
oh yeah.
Yeah, because there were this is sort of just things that I found funny, not necessarily overarching themes. This on page 69 is talking. This is no doubt natural. He's talking about the hypocrisy, basically,
right,
in Anglo-Saxon politics, which I think is hilarious. This is no doubt natural because the distinguishing quality of Anglo-Saxon politics has always been hypocrisy, and hypocrisy must always be at pains to shy away from the truth. So I just thought that was funny. And he's also just musing about, like, we are, I think, and not only from the fate of Machiavelli's reputation, forced to conclude that men do not really want to know about themselves.
Right.
And I think that maybe this is actually kind of an overarching point for me, at least. I think that is the reason that we shy away from sort of ever looking too deep into these qualities. And probably for a long time was why we didn't, because it's just, perhaps the full disclosure of what we really are and how we act is too violent a medicine. And I think about this with myself as I sort of reflect on death and stuff. It's just like, it's just, and they even talk about the knowledge of in the Garden of Eden as knowledge is evil and all this stuff. There is a part of me that wonders sometimes if like we did just like go wrong in our nomadic ways in selecting for this hyper-aware individual that I think we have.
Right.
Because I think you and I do think if you were to compare us to like our ancestors 9,000 years ago, I think we are more self-aware and like conscious. I think that they were more animalistic back in the day.
Maybe.
I know this is I feel like it's becoming a controversial opinion.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's an increase in civility and consciousness over the past millennia.
Civility, yeah.
Yes, yes. Civility.
Yes, indeed.
Well, certainly
well, what is civility?
Civility is consciousness trying to enact order on yeah.
Consciousness trying to enact order on what?
On the world.
So like a garden is very civil.
Because, it's an organized.
Because it's not a forest. We've imposed order on this little plot of land.
Yeah.
So somebody's gardening, and you go, "How civil of you."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes. I mean, yeah. I mean, like we talked about this. You could say agriculture is the first croppings of civilization.
Uh-huh.
It's like
Nice.
You can't have a civilization until you sort of, I think, stop and somewhere and sort of stay. Like I honestly think stopping movement was the first, the antecedent to civilization. We had to stop moving.
Okay.
I don't know why that matters, but who cares?
No, that's funny. I just had a thought, but I'll skip it.
Oh. Well, I don't know. We got time. I feel like we're just rambling now.
No.
It's bad? Okay. Okay, sounds good. You're going to get us canceled?
No, it'll be all right.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter. Okay, so civilization, consciousness, back to that. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in trying to work out some of the definitions, because there was a section, I don't remember if it was in the third or the fourth chapter, that actually just went through definitions.
Yes.
Because I wonder if he defines politics, because that's a word, it's used all over the place, and I guess maybe I missed it. I would love if there was actually just a concise definition of what is meant by that.
Yeah, I think he probably does that in the first chapter.
In the first? Well, because there's a definition section.
No. I'm talking about, this is the first section, I meant to say, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Of like about Dante. But I think it has to do with the idea of power between individuals.
Here we go. A note, this is the third chapter, a note on Machiavelli's terminology. Does he say politics in here, though?
I don't remember him saying politics. They talk about commonwealth and, yeah. Maybe it
anyway,
is.
So,
well,
but
it might
you
be
gave an interesting definition of it.
Well, I said the study of it, yes. The study of the struggle for power among men.
Right.
And he does this on 37.
So do you see politics, or do you think that they're saying that politics is a study rather than an activity, an action in and of itself?
That's where I'm trying to find the exact quote, because I wrote that at the top, but I think I summarized it, so I need to find exactly where he says it. Yeah. A definition is arbitrary, true enough. This is at the end of bottom of page 37, last sentence of the paragraph. Definition is arbitrary, true enough, but Machiavelli's implied definition of the field of politics as the struggle for power is at least insurance against nonsense. So it's an implied definition of the field of politics as the struggle for power.
So the struggle for power. Politics is the struggle for power.
Yes.
Okay. Does that check out to you? Does that work? Does that apply then to the uses of it?
Well, it's interesting because Nietzsche basically thinks life is about the struggle of power, or the will to power, rather. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's basically Nietzsche thinks everything's about just trying to, enforce power over things. At least, I don't know. I should be careful because I'm not a Nietzsche expert. But he has a book called The Will to Power or Will for Power.
Well, there's that same. Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. Well, because that's like Foucault, a general condensing of Foucault is that all interactions are a series of power struggles.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think about this from the concept of dopamine. It's like everything is just we're just trying to go towards wherever the dopamine is telling us to go. That's basically what drives our interactions. And I don't know. See, like, I just don't think power really comes into a play there, other than maybe energy. You know what I mean? It's like, then would you... Because, in the physical sense, power is energy, right? So we could get very...
The reason I'm probing it is...
Yes.
I think that the way you just said it is actually doing it further. saying like seeking dopamine hits or something like that, or we follow wherever the dopamine is telling us. That's it's kind of a deterministic way of putting it. It's really stripping the consciousness from it, and I think talking
unless
about
consciousness
things
is
being
able
reduced to power struggles feels like it's pushing in the direction of removing consciousness, because it seems like things aren't choices.
Well, he talks. Yes, so he talks a little bit about that, Machiavelli,
right?
About how. About how chance is basically the other big factor that every prince has to contend with, because there is an aspect to, I don't know if you could call it deterministic, but more of just like there's an aspect out of our control.
Yes.
And it could be random, they don't, I think he does think it's, I actually do get the impression that Machiavelli is deterministic. A little
really?
bit. A little bit. In statements like that, where it does seem like he does feel like there is some kind of divine ordinance that we just will never be able to fully control.
Right. Oh, I think that I would say I'm not a determinist. Or if it's true, I can't operate that way. I think
But you're a little deterministic curious, right? Is that the title?
I don't know. That's a bad title.
That was a bad title. Yeah. No, probably not.
It's funny if you can write it like that.
Deterministic curious. Yeah.
No, if you can convey that same inflection, you just can't.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, to me, determinism is the most boring thing ever. Like, okay, if everything is the way it is, why are we talking?
Yeah, this is the question, though. That's where I think every depressive goes to. I think every depressive eventually becomes a determinist,
right? My thing is like I detest nihilism.
Yeah.
I think it makes me so annoyed.
It's different from the nihilism, right? It's not a weariness of humanity.
I guess I see determinism as kind of a subset of nihilism.
See, I think it's more of a weariness with life. But I guess I could see, yes, there's certainly nihilism in some depressives. Yeah, and maybe all. Okay, I see what you're saying, but I guess I'm trying to say that it's a little bit different in that I feel like depression is just depression that leads to suicide, rather, is which you could say any depression that is taken to its extreme will.
Right.
It does feel like it's more of an issue with life itself than with humanity. But because we are humanity, maybe you can't really ever separate them. So fair enough. Yeah, I guess that's your point, maybe.
But back to the power thing.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm wondering is what is the basis? Where's the scientific basis? And maybe I missed it in suggesting that at the root of interaction is power. Because to me, if I were to just punt, and this is not from Machiavelli, not from anybody, it is just my perception, and maybe I haven't thought deep enough about it, but my perception on interaction, not just between humans, but interaction among living things, is sometimes power. It is sometimes happiness. Sometimes it's sexual gratification, which, people write about what that's for. And is procreation a form of exerting power? I don't know. You could call it that. But to me, there's sort of a range of driving factors.
I think it's just getting at the idea that, or at least for me, this is how I think about it, that life is inherently destructive. Is like, however you get away from it, some sort of destruction is required for life to continue, of some kind of breakdown, and some organism is going to get digested on some level.
Right.
Whether it's a plant or an animal or a fungus or a bacteria or an archaea. There are things.
Right.
So this
but
is
sometimes we do things like go to comedy shows or symphonies, and
Yes.
That doesn't have to do with consuming anything.
No, but again, it's if you're trying to look at things on the most fundamental level, from the generation of motion, energy is required, and so that's why life is basically motion, and so by that measure, you're always going to require energy. So you're always going to require consuming other things from other beings.
I think it's divorcing. I think that's stripping consciousness again. I would say life is not motion. I don't know what that means. I'm not saying motion is part of life, but I wouldn't say that life and motion are equivalent.
What life is completely static?
No, motion is part of life. So life and all the ingredients, motion's going to be in there. But in the same way that eggs do not equal a cake, motion does not equal life.
Well, this could be a chicken or the egg thing, I guess. Is what comes first, motion or life?
Right.
You know what I mean? And we're getting way off. I'm only just maybe we're not. I guess I'm just trying to say the reason I'm getting so philosophical, I guess, is because it's a philosophy podcast, for God's sake. Right. I'm allowed to. But also, I agree. When you look at, I could give you examples. So in a comedy show, let's think. Where's the power being exerted there? Well, you're paying money and requiring somebody to do something for you. I guess.
Not requiring them.
When you pay money, there is an expectation that something happens.
There's an expectation, but if they don't do it, you're not going to go kill them.
No, but you're going to be... Well, some crazy people might.
Sure.
I mean,
but that isn't considered reasonable. You're not considered...
I agree with that. I agree with that.
Their owner.
Yeah. But you're talking about power, and I'm just telling you where the power dynamic there could be seen.
Well, I'm not saying that there isn't a power dynamic at play. I'm saying that the reason you're not going there to exert power over a comedian. You're not going like, I have $1, I'm going to make him tell a joke. You're going to experience something that you desire to experience.
So that
you're seeking some kind of experience.
Yes. And by doing that, you're requiring something from somebody else.
I agree. I'm not saying that power dynamics aren't at play. No, but that's where the power I'm saying is. That the motive isn't power.
No, but it is in a sense, because you need something. You need to take something from somebody. You're taking something. And so I guess that's where the power is. It's because you're exerting.
So you're going there to take something from somebody. That's why you go to the comedy show.
Yes, as they're taking stuff from you. And the hope is that it's an equivalent. I mean, that's where it's...
Well, that's the like anarcho-capitalism thing. Not that it's an equivalent even. That there's gain on both sides.
Sure.
But yeah.
But at least, both parties are being... are not leaving, obviously.
But then if it's an equivalent, it's essentially... a stalemate of power. So you've gone to play a weird game of chess and tied.
No, but that doesn't. Who cares? I mean, just because it's a stalemate, just because two negatives.
I'm saying I don't
make
buy
a positive doesn't mean that negatives don't exist. What's that? Sorry, what did you say?
I'm saying I don't buy that the reason that you're doing it is to exert power.
Yeah, I mean that's fine because I think it just depends on what your philosophical framing is. And I think that's why we see things differently here.
In the book, he does make a point that the way that he's describing human sort of nature or interaction with respect to politics is not encompassing all of human activity and all of human nature. I'm starting here because I'm trying to get to politics to see if... So I don't buy it with the comedy show. I don't know that I don't buy it with politics. I don't know what the purpose of engaging in politics is.
Well, what is power to you, I guess? Maybe we should have started with that.
Right. What is power?
Just the ability to get people to do what you want? I don't know. Is that it?
Yes, I guess, because there's like power in sort of more of a physics sense, and then there's power in an interaction sense, a consciousness sense.
Right. But you could say the one thing that ties the physics and this other sense is energy. That's my at least belief, which is why I went to that first.
Right. So power, maybe your ability, to get people to do what you want, I guess, is kind of. There's probably a more eloquent way of saying it, but probably something like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's why, in the comedy show example, you have power in your money, and you're getting somebody to give you a show, and they're in doing the show getting you to give them money.
I think maybe on their side, yes. I don't think you're going there with money like, I'm going to try and get this person to do a show. The show's already set.
But the idea is if you want to participate and see the show, you need to have money.
The difference is if they had a tip jar,
you need to have
and you
power.
put $1 in, and you were like, if I put $1 in, you have to do this joke. That's different. But the show doesn't. Your $1 that you put down to get a ticket to the show does nothing. You're not exerting power over the comedian.
You are. It's just getting canceled out. It's a theatrical power, I guess you could say, but it is a power nonetheless. That's the point.
Because
but if it didn't get canceled out, it would if you paid less.
But if you paid less, you just can't go in.
Right. So it would change. It wouldn't exist.
Their show. Oh, I get it. If you're the only audience member.
Or if you didn't see it, it changed. It didn't exist. That period of time that would exist where the show happened is no longer that show. It's a different show. It's whatever. It could be the show of the back alley, but it's a different show.
Right. Okay.
I'm sorry. You probably hate this argument.
I don't hate it. I'm just...
I might listen back to this and be like, okay, I completely disagree with what I'm saying, too. This will be interesting to listen back to.
I mean, maybe you don't.
I do think I'm being a little bit frustrating, so I wouldn't be...
I am?
No, I am. I think I'm being frustrating.
I don't think so.
No?
But so with politics then, so that what we're talking about this situation where the reason you're going to the comedy show is because you're trying to exercise control over the comedian with your $1, and they're trying to exercise control over you with their microphone to get you to give them $1.
Sure.
And it's a wash. So what about with politics? What are you trying to do?
Oh, I mean, you're trying to get the ability to dictate the masses.
Is everybody trying to do that?
Anybody that's trying to rule, yes.
Anybody that's trying to engage in politics. I guess, so in a democratic system, everybody's engaging in politics, and so is everybody trying to control everybody else?
Yes.
I mean, I think so, but... And then in a monarchy...
Which he also sort of talks about, too. Is how he talks about how you want to have opposing forces to cancel. I mean, he talks about this kind of thing about having different powers canceling each other out, which is why you want to have the best type of government is a mixed one, because you have the nobility combating the plebes, which are combating the king, and everybody's hopefully going to basically balance out into a net zero or net gain, right? Yes, but this is why I was saying in the comedy example, the power is being exerted. It's just in the ideal setting, both powers are canceling each other out. So everybody's happy and nobody's feeling like they're subservient, which is why you could say power in its essence is not bad. But maybe...
Who says it is?
Well, some people, certainly. Definitely some people say it's bad.
Well, that's silly.
Yeah, I agree. But
I mean, those people. What do you have without power? Then you have no motion, right? Then you have rocks.
Yeah, exactly. You're just a rock.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think power is bad at all. What I think is where I feel like we're disagreeing. I'm actually agreeing with the text because I think I'm agreeing with the text. I think that this is very true in the political sense. But then when he's careful to say this is not a statement about all human activity, I don't think that all activity is engaging in politics. And there's a common idea now that's popular that the personal is political, that everything is political. I disagree. I do not think that all activity and all interaction is political, especially when we're talking about the desire to impose your will on others or impose your will on the masses. I think there are people who operate in that mode where they are always trying to do that. but I don't think all people interact that way. And I was just thinking about a monarchy system. So we were saying in a democratic system, everybody is kind of trying to impose their will on everybody else. We're sort of all battling each other at the polling booth. In a monarchic system, there's actually most people aren't even engaging in politics. The serfs are not trying to enact their will on the king or the lord or anything.
No, but they will. This is again what he's saying. It's important to have
if
the
a
will of the
revolution
people,
happens.
right? If and to the point of the signori, the person to the Duke of Greece of Athens that came and took over Florence. You know, he was basically saying like, be careful because just know like, you know, if you are overly tyrannical, you will have rebellion.
Right. Yeah. So then, in that case, they are engaging in trying to impose
because that's
power.
what
I mean in a system where they're not. So let's say things are going along okay or whatever. There's a king and lords, and they're all kind of battling with each other, and then the serfs down at the bottom don't really give a shit.
Yeah.
And they're probably not reading in the paper like, oh, did you hear what they did with taxes?
Yeah, I mean, that's what he says.
Like
I mean, or at least this is what Burnham purports in the beginning, too, of like how most people in the non-ruling example are happy to just sort of live their lives on their plots of land with, you know, with a degree of liberty, and they'll be okay. But as soon as you start to impose more and more constrictions, that's when you'll start to get that group becoming political. And you'll start to select for, I guess you could say, the sleeping rulers that wouldn't have, you know, gone for it. I mean, people are talking about this kind of stuff now, about, you know, it's like how, like everything's so crazy. And because, like, honestly, you could look at, if we're looking at the U.S., the late stage empire, right? Whatever. But, you know, it feels like when there is rampant corruption, that does seem to wake up certain people in, you could say, the plebes, that then arouse to, you know, cause the new orders. And I mean, you know, and another thing that sort of principle that he discusses, that Machiavelli discusses, is this idea that change is also a law. It's like there is no government that will last forever. And that it's constantly, you have sort of these cycles of good governments going into tyranny, which then build up into horrible tyrannies, which then descend back into disorder, only to be built back up into great sort of empires. And it's interesting because you could almost look at like Germany and is a great example of that. It's like Germany was just killing things in terms of like science and you know, you could say civilization and everything, and the Enlightenment and everything, and then and then they sort of basically fall into tyranny, right? But I would say they're kind of building back up, but I guess we'll see. But you know,
I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult with modern examples because nothing in the Western world has fallen to that degree, because it's all still propped up by all the other states around.
Yeah, Dresden was bombed pretty bad, though. You know what I mean?
Right. But Germany never fell in the way that I think Machiavelli's describing.
I don't know. It was partitioned into two by Russia and Germany. You know what I mean? It's like
by
Russia and America. I'm sorry.
Right.
Well, sort of Russia and Germany, but you know, because the West, Germany was. Technically,
right. But what I'm saying is, it's kind of like Iraq. It's a similar thing. They were beaten in a war and they were decimated. So it wasn't even that they crumbled internally. It wasn't that the system got so
no, but you would argue
tyrannical that the people of Germany rose up. That didn't happen at all.
Yes.
The other states around it destroyed it. And then cradled it.
Who hung
tried to rebuild it.
Who hung Saddam?
What?
Who hung Saddam?
Oh! You mean that the Iraqi people did?
Yes. Who hung
or
Gaddafi?
Their government or something?
Who hung Gaddafi? Or killed Gaddafi rather. It's always the people.
Well, who did that was a militant group that the U.S. was funding, I believe.
Sure, but you know what I mean. Yeah, and you could argue, sure, yes, and fair enough. And maybe, I'm not even going to disagree on this level, right? But obviously there are other power sections, but in at least the overt setting, it was the Iraqi people that sort of took Saddam out.
What I'm saying is that there's confounding variables. I'm saying that the Machiavelli situation that he's describing is this kind of neat cycle. And I'm saying that we don't see that very often because all of our examples aren't really neat cycles because there's all these external variables changing everything.
No, I think the better sort of, you could, and sorry to go binary again, but the idea of just that everything's a sine wave, I guess. Everything's a wave, and you're going to have peaks and troughs in everything, and civilizations is no different. That's really how I look at it. So you can look at it in these complicated ways, or you can just look at it as you're going to have a certain civilization that's going to have a peak, and then inevitably it's going to have a crest, and then inevitably it will start to rise again. Maybe it won't hit that maximum peak, but it will rise again, and then it will probably fall. It's just like everything. So which is probably why it's complicated, because it's maybe Iraq hasn't risen to whatever peak that it will, but who's to say that in 100 years it won't? And certainly, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, the ancient Sumer, right? They were the peak. They were the Rome. So yeah. It depends on the time scale.
The question, are they going to be the Rome again? Is this the idea?
It's the time scale is the question. And that's, I guess, my point, is it just depends on what time scale you're looking at it as. But I think
not everything has a long enough time scale to have multiple peaks and valleys.
Well, it depends. This is why math is so difficult and why finding max peaks is so difficult, because it's there are a lot of local peaks in any signal.
Zoom in, it's fractal or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't know. So what do you think? We can close it up, but what do you think of Machiavelli then? So you don't like James Burnham, but what do you think of his...
I don't hate him either. I just don't think I would get along with him.
No, and I completely agree with you on the dryness of the writing. I felt like actually reading it the second time, it was easier, but I remember the first time I read this, I was just like, goodness, this is just ridiculous. My goodness. Burnham, what were you doing?
Machiavelli's cool. He's very hard for me to understand.
Maybe that should be the title.
It's fun, that they teach him with Rothbard at Columbia. That's sort of funny. But I don't think I get him enough.
Mm-hmm. Well,
the funny thing is, though, as we're reading all these things, I always bring up that Ayn Rand thing, but it was a joke, obviously, that Machiavelli stole it from Ayn Rand. But I feel like what I'm noticing is that this same kind of dualistic lion-fox, or some kind of version of that, Nietzsche had it with noble people and Jews. And
it wasn't Jews, but yeah. Okay. Jesus.
Right. And Ayn Rand has it with Attilas and witch doctors and this whole thing. And I don't know. I feel like it's this same dichotomy of rulers of various sorts that seems to pop up all the time.
So do you have an issue with that, or you're just noticing?
No,
it?
My issue is why is it always two?
Well, could there be a significance of that?
Right. Peaks, valleys, everything's in two.
Cosine and sine, man. But then you get the tangent. The hell.
Right.
But the cosine
but the tangent's not a nice graph.
Right, and the cosine and the sine's basically just the same.
What are you going to do with that stupid graph? Nothing.
It's true. Can't even continue it. Right. So I don't know. I agree, though. I've noticed that trend as well, I guess, of two types. But again, I think it's just because this is how our brains work, Mm-hmm. It's just like we probably have one neuron that is connects a bunch of concepts, and then you get another neuron. I don't know. Anyway, what am I talking about? Let's get off of that.
I mean, what I'm interested in is, I mean, when I was in grad school, they talked about this a lot too, about sort of rebelling against the dualisms of classic philosophy.
Yeah.
Specifically, they were talking about, Cartesian dualism, mind and body.
Right.
But generally, dualisms of, like in music, loud and soft. I mean, everything. We like to put everything in dualisms. And, you can talk about spectra instead, and there's the whole idea of fuzzy math, that literally everything is a spectrum, and there's no such thing as a true mathematical fact. We're just getting increasing probabilities. And
right.
Like
well, and it's like you get a spectrum out of a dualist
exactly.
thing
It's
in the
still,
sense, right?
You're still there. You're stuck.
Right. You have a range. You have two extremes. Because I think it always comes back to two for me because of the consciousness-unconsciousness thing, which is maybe that's why they always get back to it too, because I obviously feel like everybody's really talking about, a lot of people talk about consciousness without directly talking about it. I think because it is a scary thing to talk about, because it requires you to think about yourself, and nobody likes to do that because then you start to realize, you look into the void, right?
Right. But then this to me sounds like God, not God, like.
Yeah, but that's my point.
Sin versus God.
Right.
Like it's all the same. And then I start to think, is this either some deep truth that we're all catching into, or is it we're just kind of like boring and stuck in we can't get out of our own way of thinking?
I think it's probably...
Or both. Yeah.
Probably both.
Yeah.
¿Por qué no los dos?
Right. Right.
All right. Well, I think that was good, though.
Next?
Yeah.
I kind of want to read Machiavelli now. That's the other thing about this is like I need to read more.
Yeah, the Prince.
I've tried to read The Prince a couple times.
Oh, you did?
And it's a little like hard for me to get into.
Oh, really? I thought it was actually very readable. Yeah. Maybe you'd have a bad edition. I got the Penguin. I have the Penguin Classics.
Nice.
No big deal. All right, I got to think about what's the best one to do next, because we need to do the Pareto one. But I'm wondering if we end with that one, or if it's better to end.
I like the title, A Note on Myth and Violence.
Oh yeah, we could do that.
I don't know if it's a good.
Let's see.
It's not very long.
I think the Moscow one might be better though, just because it's the theory of the ruling class.
Yeah, sure.
Let me see though. Yeah. Oh, and actually, the Iron Law of... Actually, I almost think Michael's might be what we should read, because it's really the Iron Law of Oligarchy that I kind of wanted to... is the reason I wanted to read this, because I kind of want to know what your opinion is on that. How long is this one? Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I think
it's not too bad.
Like 30, 40 pages. Last one was like 60. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's okay. I was like going through it. I was like, damn.
I know. Sorry. Yeah, because it's
one looks like it's only like 35 pages.
We were gonna do the Dante one, and then I called the Audible. So sorry, and I called it without looking at the length. As I was reading it, I was also like, oh, Anthony's probably cursing my name.
Yeah, I ripped my shirt.
Yeah. Oh man, I said your name. I have to bleep that. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Actually, it's late. This late in the episode, I have to bleep. I have to bleep a lot in this. Actually, of me though. Me. Oh. I've been unhinged this episode. I don't know. Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we'll do Moscow.
Wait.
Or no, sorry. What's his name? Michael's.
Yeah.
Part 5. The Limits of Democracy. My goodness.
It makes me want to read Democracy, the God That Failed.
Who's that by?
Hans Hermann Hoppe.
Ah, yeah. Okay. I've heard of Hoppe. I haven't ever read any Hoppe.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
He also has, what does he call it? A Brief History of Mankind or something like that?
Maybe that's how I've heard of him.
I mean, that's quite a project.
Yeah.
Also, it's funny to call it a brief hit. Like, just...
Well,
I'm just going to give you a little history of all humans ever.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because one of my favorite books, I actually thought about whether it would be good to read it for this, but I don't think it would be because it's just kind of an encyclopedia, is Bill Bryson's A History of Nearly Everything. The title made me think of that, though, because it's like, it's like a history of nearly everything. But, of course, what does that mean? Yeah. Do you ever read any Bill Bryson?
I don't know who that is.
Yeah. He's just a good author. But that book was good. How's gig? Any fun gig updates?
Fun gig. I mean, I had good gigs this week. Oh, actually, yeah. I was playing at this place after we got off the phone on, was that Friday?
Yeah. Saturday.
Friday. Yeah. And so it was this place, they just put up a new stage with like a mesh canopy over their courtyard. And for some reason, they hooked up one of the corners to a live power cable. And so while we were playing, it started sparking. I thought somebody was shooting off fireworks next to us. I looked over, and it's just like these huge sparks.
Wow.
And I thought that the mesh was going to catch fire.
Wow.
And like this fire canopy was going to come down.
Wow. But nothing happened.
So what happened was the sparks actually burned through the metal hook on it.
Wow.
And it did fall, but it wasn't on fire. So.
Yeah, but still, that's crazy. Could have hit somebody, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was wild. And then we had to cancel the rest of the show. But
wow. So how long did you play for?
We'd done one set, so we'd played for like an hour 15.
Okay. Oh, how was that? This was a few episodes ago, but it was a gig at the Armadillo place.
Oh, Armadillo Den. Yeah.
Yeah, how was that?
It was really good.
Cool. Did you figure out if that was the Armadillo World Headquarters, if it used to be that?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay. That's what I think it was called. It was a famous venue in Austin.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. I'll look it up. It probably says on like Wikipedia or something.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think I hear your kid in the background, so maybe I'll let you go. Maybe I'll let you go, parent.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Good talking.
Goodbye.